Thank you, Pella, for talking with me today about the rights of nature and about your work. So I'm really excited that we've been having conversations lately. So because of the conference which is coming up here in June, the conference on the rights of nature and the future of democracy, we've been talking because I would really like you to be keynote at the conference, and you've said yes
Yeah,
to that.
it's
And
my
that's
honor
led
and pleasure.
yes. Well, that's led to different conversations, and in this regard, we both thought it would be helpful perhaps to record this conversation. And so I would like to just as a beginning, when I've done these Earth Talks, sometimes I've presented the other person, but that can become very long and elaborate. So I've rolled back a bit. But I would just like to say, maybe as a beginning point, that I feel like this connection arose a couple of years ago when a mutual friend of ours, Dougal Hine, came to visit, and he heard about the work that we are doing in Earthways on the rights of nature, and immediately he was like, you need to talk to Pella. And so I've looked up your work, and I mean, I was just amazed to find, because I've lived in the UK for a long time and came back to Denmark later in life. So it was wonderful to find out that here was someone who is sort of like a Scandinavian champion of the rights of nature, because you've been working in this field for a really long time, and been doing all sorts of things. But I'm already starting to present you. So I would just start off with asking if you want to say a little bit about who you are and your work with the rights of nature, and perhaps how did you get into this work?
Yeah, thank you. And it's really amazing to meet you too. And I think to me it's so strong, like powerful this way, how we are weaving this understanding that rights of nature is to me, and how I mean, because you and I, we just met, but it's like there is such an alignment. And I have come to this work very gradual, and to me it's like a continuous exploration of how we in our culture actually we don't put a value on nature. And that's like to me it's an existential abyss. Like we
Mhm.
actually don't understand that that life on earth is valuable. uh, it's sort of, it's growing on me. I made my academic background is in ecology, and I made my thesis fieldwork in Ecuador, and this is more than 20 years ago, in rainforest restoration. And I went to Yasuni, which is arguably, it could be the most biodiverse place on earth.
Yeah,
And there is or was oil exploration taking place in this national park that
yeah,
has all the protection that nature can have. And I'm like, okay, what does this mean? Like, it means that if we can't protect a place like this, we actually can't protect anything.
yeah,
And that means we have to shift how we organize ourselves in this world. But I didn't know of rights of nature. I didn't even know that when Ecuador decided in 2008 to include rights of nature in their constitution. I wasn't aware of that process, even though I worked with people in Ecuador. So it was later that when this declaration on the rights of Mother Earth was drafted in Bolivia, a couple of years afterwards, we found out, a group of people in Sweden found out about that, and we were like, okay, we have to do something with this. And we had very dim ideas around what that would be. So since that time, I've sort of been working on it. And mainly most of my time I've been working for ecocide to become an international crime, which is very important, very powerful, very suitable to the system we have, because it's actually just one piece of legislation that can be put into an already existing institution, the
Yes.
International Criminal Court. But to me, rights of nature is so much more holistic and alive and diverse and complex, and I've always been longing to work in that complexity. So that's why I've now founded what we call an embassy of the Baltic Sea. So I live on an island in the Baltic Sea, east of Stockholm, and so that's really, it's my backyard, and I've seen what's happening to that ecosystem. So it's
Mhm.
like taking this work home, but it's also about having something that people can sort of immediately kind of understand what it's about. So it's quite fun.
Yeah. And do you want to do you want to say a little bit more about the embassy of the Baltic Sea, and what is the idea and what is the driver? Because one of the when we spoke first, and you were talking about this, I just thought how powerful it is all of a sudden to use a bioregion as the organizing principle rather than a nation or a country, because all of a sudden we're in the same boat as a lot of other countries, the Baltic countries,
Yeah, yeah,
and then national borders don't really mean anything anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's so much to say about that. I mean, just last week, actually, so when you think about rights of nature, you can think about it as legal rights
Hmm.
fitting into our legislations, our legislative systems, like ecocide, for example. Um, but you can also think about it as moral rights, like nature has the right to exist and thrive, whether we recognize it or not.
Hmm.
Um, but if we speak about it as legal rights, we have for some years now, we've actually had a parliamentary motion to include rights of nature in the Swedish constitution.
Yes.
And last week was the debate around that in our
Ah.
parliament, and so we again know that nature is rightless in our legislation.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's kind of a difference between the ecocide law work and the embassy of the Baltic Sea work, that to recognize the rights of the Baltic Sea there's not really an existing legal framework where that can happen.
Right.
So that work is more about building culture, where we understand ourselves as participants in a bioregion.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, there are so many levels to this work, but as you say, one thing is that we tend to organize ourselves according to some boundaries that are there because some king had wars 200 years ago or something like that. I mean, our countries
Yeah.
have been shifting our
Oh, yeah.
borders many times. Um, but to really recognize ourselves as participants in a living whole, there are borders
Mhm.
that we are in, like whether we recognize it or not, and they are often oriented around water. And it's interesting with the Baltic Sea. It's kind of in a way it's a sneaky choice because you can work towards rights of nature from many perspectives, obviously, and most of them are really contentious and conflict laden. So, for example, we could work from from a forestry point of view or from a mining point of view, from
Mm.
these things, and then you would immediately run into very powerful interests.
Yeah.
But the Baltic Sea is kind of easy in that sense because it's so well known how bad the state of the Baltic Sea is. Like
Yeah.
there is no there's that's not an issue. We all know that. There's so much research since decades around the state of the Baltic Sea, and it's kind of a measurement of how we govern ourselves in our countries, that this sea is in such a bad shape. So we can say that, our laws don't protect the Baltic Sea. We
Hmm.
have to do something else.
Yeah.
And um, acknowledging and speaking for acknowledging the rights of the modern human beings in this bioregion, and also having or opening a space or many spaces to represent their interests. That's what the embassy wants to do. So we think that if we don't have, like, we are not able to govern ourselves as human beings in this very complex system that we are in, like whether we understand it or not,
Hmm.
uh, if we don't listen to other beings also.
Yeah.
Which is why I also love the title of the conference. Maybe you want to say something about how you came to that, the future of democracy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, along the same lines, I think so. Re the like you say, the rights of nature, you can come at it from many different angles, and one of the at the one of the core juridical aspects is that we see nature as an object that becomes part of our legal systems as something as an object on along the lines of many other objects, human created objects. But we want to talk about it as a subject and as a democratic subject.
Mm.
So um, so that's where I think this overlap with the whole talk about democracy is interesting because it is clear for many reasons, not just to do with how horribly we're treating nature, but that democracy is, I mean, uh, I sometimes think like this, you know, this version of democracy we have today, that can't be the end station because then it is the end station for for
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
us. We have to keep developing the idea of democracy, and where we are based in Denmark around Himmelbjerget has this long history and tradition of democracy. It's where some of the first folkemøder, the people's assemblies, were taking place, and there was a real democratic movement at that time to shift away from the monarchy, and that has a long history.
Mm.
But we feel that where we are based has this root going into thinking about it expanding democracy, basically from being power being in the hands of very few people to a wider people that for a long time excluded women, and it's been like a long struggle to widen the circle, and it feels like we have to widen the circle now to include more than humans or other beings than humans. And there is so much inspiration now as well from all around the planet where this work is taking place. Um, and so, yeah, so working for the rights of nature sort of also has to entail working for democracy, or at least I think that coupling is very powerful because all of a sudden we can have a broad conversation across. society rather than this being a sort of geeky, nerdy discussion for people who love nature or for
Mm.
people working with the legal system. And that's where I think the embassy of the Baltic Sea is also, I mean, the whole concept, the whole idea of an embassy is very powerful. And you also are talking about opening consulates in different countries and connecting this in a diplomatic way. And I think that that is very appealing.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and oh, I have so many questions, but I just want to ask you a little bit more about, because when I have this idea of widening the democratic circle, I mean, this didn't happen because people said, "Oh, we need a new law, let's change it." Because there's a whole, our culture is also obstructing this. We need to change the way we think. We need to change the way we relate to nature, the way we see nature. So the whole cultural track is very important. Perhaps it's the most important because it seems like laws always come after the fact.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and the embassy of the Baltic Sea seems like, I mean, how do you see this? How do these two aspects interweave and go together? Because this is a discussion we've had a lot with the Nature's Constitutional Assembly.
Okay.
Do we need to just go for the
Yeah.
stop ecocide law, or do we need to actually start working more deeper with cultural change?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a rich subject. I mean, because I think also the moment in time we find ourselves in, the institutions that we have leaned on in our society, they are built on various things. So what one thing that they have built on, like since the very first law in Western culture, is the Roman law that
Hmm.
made that distinction between legal subject and legal object. And this is almost 2000 years ago. Um, since that time, our culture has made the distinction between humans and nature.
Hmm.
So that's why I think actually rights of nature is something even it's an even greater shift. It's a greater transformation than widening the circle. It's actually stepping into another circle
Right.
where you as like when you begin to question in democracy who is the demos, who is the people, that's when you really challenge the system.
Mm.
And that's what obviously like indigenous peoples do. Like they talk about the fish people and the tree people and the um, crow people and so forth. Like there are so many voices. But it's also so that's kind of the metaphysical understanding of who we are in this world. But there's also a really, really physical reason why we have to totally rethink how we organize ourselves, like our institutions, because they have been resting on so the democracy that we are used to is resting upon an industrial growth system based on fossil energy. And we see what's happening like when we run into the borders of the that possibility to keep extracting, which is what's happening now. Like that's why we are seeing all of these oil related wars. So we have to, I mean, we are in a position where we don't have a choice. Like we have to restructure our
Mhm.
institutions. We just have to choose how, in what way.
Yeah.
And to me, rights of nature is such a brilliant idea because it kind of uses the power of existing structures, existing institutions to move towards something else.
Hmm.
So that's why the cultural shift and or the cultural work and the legal work, they are really supporting each other in a very constructive way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then when like how you choose what to do, I think is mostly due to personal motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. And so one of the things that so I really like this image of not it's not widening the circle, but it's actually stepping into a different circle because it also involves a transformation in our ontology and how we experience being being human beings. Um, and and one thing that always comes up or it has come up for a long time. In the beginning, I was quite concerned with it, and I think more and more I've become a little bit more pragmatic. But it's this issue of representation.
Mm.
Because how can we as humans speak for nature or on behalf of nature? And I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the discussions. And in the embassy of the Baltic Sea, you are opening a space for being ambassadors and for having consulates. How do you work with representation? How do you see this issue? Just to so I mean, some would say we are human beings. We can't we don't have access to the knowledge of what the world is like for ants. So
Yeah.
you know, so we can't, that's the extreme version. And then there's
Right.
all sorts of other ways of seeing it. But how do
Yeah.
you approach it?
Um, so as you said, this often comes up. It came up when I spoke in a yearly conference for the people who are like conservation professionals in Sweden. And they asked, so, but how can we know what nature wants? Like, how do we do the representation? And um, the person who spoke before me, he spoke about the Umeå River, so one of the big rivers in the north of Sweden, which is also in a bad shape. And he had been really detailing like what would happen, what would we have to do for this river to be more healthy? And I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, we obviously can't know everything. Like one of our problems in our civilization is that we think that we can reach a total knowledge.
Right.
So what this is also putting us sort of in front of us is that not a possibility.
Hmm.
That's not a point that you can reach.
Yeah.
But you can work to increase your understanding. And actually, that the case that we don't know everything is not the case that we don't know anything. Like we know a lot, we just
Yeah.
don't apply it because we make different priorities with the worldview we have.
Hmm.
And it's also, it's like sometimes I think we have, by objectifying the world, we have sort of put that question away from us. So by saying that actually there's no one there, there's no
Hmm.
interest and no needs, we don't have to care about that because they are not there.
Hmm.
Uh, it's like we have made ourselves deaf. Like we have said, there is no one to represent, so we don't have to care about that. So just by saying, well, actually there are interests that we can try to understand, that's a huge
Hmm.
shift.
Yeah.
And to me, that shift, like one of the really exciting aspects of that shift is how we view ourselves as humans. Because one of the most beautiful things about being a human is that you have imagination. You
Hmm.
have the potential of taking someone else's perspective and try to understand and voice that. And people have always done this. Like we have had cultural roles where shamans had that responsibility to try to listen and speak for more than human beings. And I think it's really growing into our true role as humans.
Hmm.
by trying to do that thing. So it's
Mm.
really something very, very beautiful.
Yeah. Mm. Yes, indeed. Um, you speak about this in about about imagination. So I think you call it moral imagination. You've written an article about I think it's helped me a little bit. It's called something with the moral imagination for the rights of nature, something like that, around the embassy of the Baltic Sea.
Yeah.
And you mention, I mean, you talk about Thomas Barry and his vision of or his idea. It's not, maybe it's not his, but the great law, and he's talking about sort of two levels of law.
Hmm.
The great law, which is, you know, the natural laws, the laws of nature, what we want to call them, the laws of the earth, the way that nature works, the evolution, and then there's the human law, um, and um, in this article, you say towards the end something about what happens when we start imagining ourselves not as citizens within this small sphere, but as citizens within the wider bioregion that is, you know, the Baltic Sea. And it's this change of imagination. All of a sudden, the world shifts. The world is different, and I would say richer. I mean, one of the amazing things about nature and building relationships with nature is that the world opens up and becomes more than we thought it was because our imagination has limited the way we think the world is and who we are in it.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah. So, yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what this is not like a sort of like challenges and opportunities question, but it's more, I mean, you've been following this field for a long time, and you speak with, I mean, also you are hosting a podcast on the rights of nature, and you're speaking with people all over the planet, working on this topic in different ways, from indigenous perspectives, from also people who are working with law, and what do you see? How do you see the field moving? What are the what is there a momentum for the rights of nature right now? How do you experience this, and what do you pick up in your conversations?
Yeah, it's definitely a momentum. One of the first conversations I had was with a legal scholar from Australia, Alessandro Pellizzon, and he calls this, and I can recommend his book actually. He put his book on this subject open source, so anyone can read it. Usually those books
Yeah.
cost like 100 euros, and he calls this a quantum or the similar transformation in law as quantum physics was for physics, like a totally different and richer way of understanding what law can be.
Hmm.
Um, and it's definitely a momentum. Like when I began, I didn't think I thought that this will not happen in my lifetime. Basically. But
Yeah.
it's moving so fast in all directions. Like I'm continuously astonished how much is happening, both in legal systems in various parts of the world, where we in the Nordics and Europe in general, we're quite
Hmm.
slow,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but also in other contexts, like for example in organizations where organizations include a voice of nature or a speaker for the living.
Hmm.
There is a proposal now in the French Parliament, I think, um, that I don't understand so much about yet, but I'm going to speak with the person behind that,
Yeah.
um, where they want to include in law that the corporations have to have on their board. a representative for nature. And you
Mm.
know, who I couldn't have imagined that 1 year ago. So
Yeah.
this is the most exciting thing happening in law and generally in like governance right now, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that's also due to the meta crisis. Like we see how our institutions are falling apart, and it's in the cracks that this is growing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And when so I spent some time, maybe when I was researching my PhD, especially maybe like so around 15 years ago, and I was following what was going on in Ecuador and in Bolivia with the declarations of the rights of Mother Earth and all of this, and then for various reasons around the time I moved back to Denmark and became a teacher, it sort of fell off the radar a little bit. And then coming back to this work with Earthways, I discovered the case of the Lake Menor in Spain, and he all of a sudden I hadn't followed it. It just was just the news. Oh, now this lake has rights,
Mm.
and uh, and I know that you've also been talking to some of the people involved in that, and it's really interesting to hear how that how it came from a popular uh, they collected an immense amount of signatures, like really
Almost 700,000 signatures.
sev
During the pandemic, they did that.
yeah, I mean, amazing. So this is really like a grassroots effort
Yeah.
that actually became the proposal for a law that was then taken up by the system. And I think what you say about that our current institutions are sort of failing, but they also have they're also like a stepping stone to something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And this law is actually changing the way that people are relating to the lake, but also what you can and what you cannot do to the lake, which is of course really really important for the agricultural area around and so on. And I was just amazed when I read this. I thought this would like a bit like you. Maybe 10 years ago, I would have thought this is this is not going to happen in Europe, but
Yeah.
it has happened already. It is already a precedent,
Yeah.
and perhaps we in the Nordic countries we have some catching up to do, and we also have to find out how does this work in our context and find our way with that.
Yeah, and there are two things I want to say there. One is I can recommend that conversation I had with the lawyer behind the
Yes.
Marmenor case,
Yeah.
uh, because he's so interesting and open with his own shift. Like he thought rights of nature, well, that's some, some soft philosophical idea. But
Hmm.
then he suddenly saw, no, this is actually a really powerful legal shift, and how that shifted for him that he couldn't see from the beginning that it could actually have a real tangible impact. And then when he saw that, it sort of changed how he viewed his work
Yeah.
essentially. And that's so interesting. It's also like the first legal scholar looking at this in the 70s, Christopher Stone. His essay from that time, which is very famous, Should Trees Have Standing, it begins with the introduction, the unthinkable. And to me, that's such a sign about how this is really a paradigm shift. It's unthinkable from
Hmm.
one paradigm, and it's the basis of another
Hmm.
paradigm.
Yeah.
And what was the other thing I wanted to say? Yeah, it's this thing. So, with the embassy of the Baltic Sea, we call it a laboratory of care.
Hmm.
And that has two meanings. One is that actually we have to um, view this as a practice, as a cultural practice. Like we don't know really how to do this, but we can practice. We can have a laboratory. It can be emergent, and it has to do with how we care. It doesn't have to do so much with knowledge. We have so much knowledge,
Hmm.
like around the Baltic Sea. We know so much, and that knowledge hasn't made a lot of difference. But it's when people come together and care, like they did in Mar Menor in
Hmm.
Spain, that's when things can change. So, like, we have to, um, how do I say this? We have to find find our carrying capacity, like when we have gone so far over our carrying capacity on earth, we have as humans to find our carrying capacity again.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's, I think, I mean, your work is about that,
Hmm.
supporting that.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. And so maybe we can round off on a little bit of a speculative note, because I have, in relation to what we were talking about, I have s- sort of some hopes and also some questions around the Scandinavian context for this work, and what can we do? I mean, we hope to bring people together and to build alliances and to learn from each other. I mean, there are some significant cases already, for example, with in Sweden with Lake Vatten, and I'm thinking, can we sort of learn from this in Denmark, and perhaps the most importantly, build a larger community of care, like you say, that actually cares about this and that can see that the struggles in one country are related to the struggles in another country, and perhaps deeper than the struggles is the cultural change. So I don't know if this is really a, a question, or if you are willing to just speculate with me a little bit in this area. What do you think? I mean, sometimes when nothing, like we said, Scandinavia is a little bit behind on this. This also means there's a large space for improval or improvement. What do you see? What do you? I mean, you're already involved in the Ecosites Sweden and in a lot of these campaigns. What what can we do? How can we help each other?
I mean, through your conference, through opening spaces where we meet, through that kind of convening, I think is actually the most powerful thing. And then there is probably so much to do around creating digital platforms where we, I mean, I often think that organizing this kind of thing is for the movement to become visible to itself, like opening that kind of information flows where we can just become aware that there's so much happening and there are so many potential great corporations happening.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's a good image. This is sort of self-awareness for the movement that didn't know that it was a movement.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So,
yeah,
I mean, let's just have the intention that we walk away from your conference with some seeds around
mm,
that.
yeah. Mm. And also, I mean, one of the things in Denmark, of course, with I really hope we manage to find the funds to invite people from Greenland and also from Iceland and from Sapmi, um, because there is sometimes I think a lot of, especially maybe especially Danes, can have a sense that, this indigenous perspective is far away, but
Yeah,
it's actually here,
yeah,
and it's not it's not difficult to access, or it's just a matter of this change of mindset again. And I mean, in Greenland, they is also like, I mean, with the Inuit culture is also a little bit uh, unique. compared to, for example, Sapmi and so on. But it's this cross-cultural conversation with how do we actually view, experience nature, which has a huge potential, I think, to in that cultural stream to shift to shift some of the conversation.
And also remembering that we have a Nordic culture that also had that awareness of
Yes.
nature as an animated
Hmm.
community of subjects.
Yes.
And and I think sometimes think that, you know, that that separation was so long ago and so thorough in Europe that
Hmm.
there is a big trauma there
Right.
to be healed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And do you want to, I'm just curious, do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because I know that you're also working as an educator and you're working with nature connectedness. And I think this is the more I'm learning about this trauma informed approach to many things, the more important it seems to be actually foundational to a lot of the work that we do in general.
Mm. Um, I mean, I if we look at human history for 99.99% of our history as a species, we lived in a community of subjects, in a community of life, where there were so many voices that we were interacting with. And through our very, very recent Western image of humans as the crown of creation and the only one with the soul and the only one with the consciousness, and you know, that's still being reinforced. um that's such a deep um yeah, separation, which is very terrifying
Mm.
for anyone. Like, being in relationship is our most immediate need, probably. And when we are losing that and putting that often in our culture, like we're putting that on maybe one person, like when we are living in this relationship with one person that has to carry, or maybe the children that has to carry all the weight of our relational need, it's no, like, that's when you become extractive. That's when you become a colonizing force, because of that you have an unmet need that you don't even know how to address,
Right.
because we don't have a cultural framework around even understanding the need. And still, I think, you know, it's also so close. Like, in a way, it's so accessible to find ways of healing,
Hmm.
to come home to our to participants in a living whole. And I think that's really so beautiful, because from the view of separation, we have two images now around humans. One is that humans are we are that like the best, the most important thing in the universe, or we are the worst, like the most destructive. Like, the world would be better off if there were fewer humans, or if there were no humans at all.
Right.
And all of those, both of those perspectives are very destructive.
Hmm.
So if we come home to being participants again, we can understand that we are actually, as all the other participants, we are a valuable part, but
Mm.
we have to also act like a valuable part, in a word that I think is so important. And I'm astonished that it's not more well known. We can become homeotelic. So, you know, homeostasis is like any living system keeps itself in a in a steady state. Like I keep my
Mhm.
body in a very narrow
Yeah,
temperature degree, for
yeah.
example, to be
Dynamic
healthy.
balance.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
uh, and I forget his name now, the guy behind this word homeotelic, which is that you also work for the purpose to keep the larger whole of which you are a part in
Mm,
a good balance.
right.
And that's what we can do.
Yeah.
But to do that, we have to also understand that we are a part. And to me, that's
Mhm.
what rights of nature is really helping.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And so we have an election coming up in Denmark now, and one of the issues is the way that we polluted the groundwater. And that now I say we because really it's the agricultural sector that has done that. Uh, but I think it's all of a sudden moved very close to home because now it's when you open your tap, you're thinking you're thinking about it. And all of a sudden, this separation, the way that we've been compartmentalized
Yeah,
and separated from each other, all of a sudden is very clear.
yeah,
It doesn't work like this. No one wants, everyone wants to drink clean water, and what can we do? And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
we've sort of done it to ourselves in a
yeah,
way.
yeah,
Um, so we have to step into that, and um, I'm often thinking about those communities that haven't done it to themselves. So a lot of the Inuit communities, a lot of the communities, especially in the north, where all of these pollutants travel via the food chain, but also via the waters and the air, and you know they it's their it's what they eat that has been polluted, you know. But they are so inspirational because they are not giving up their way of living. They know that this is a way of living and they are persisting. Although it's must be, I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, what it would be like to think about the food that you serve for your children or the water for that matter. And we have, I think we have a lot to learn from these communities.
yeah, indeed.
Mm.
Yeah, we have to be grateful that they are still around and that some of them are
Mm.
willing to teach us and show us the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
right story.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's very true and very deep that there is such a thing as a right story, and there
Hmm.
is such a thing as a wrong story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, and that has to do with values, right? So not with knowledge really so much, but with values, what you value. And it's very interesting that with this very cherished capacity in our culture to be rational, to think in a rational way and intellectually understand things, like you said, when we see that the water that becomes part of who we are, like with our rational thinking, that's not a difficult thing to understand.
Mm.
Uh, and still we have made that to ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So mm,
Mm.
interesting times.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, yeah, so all the inspiration, I think I'm also thinking of the whole the it's not really just a concept, it's a way of being in kinship and the way that, you know, relationality is something we are more and more talking about and thinking about, um, and how we have relationship is important, right? So that brings us back into what we think of as nature or, you know, the community of life or something like that. But and regarding the trauma, this is the healing.
Hmm.
This is the thing that helps us
Yeah,
move on beyond all of that hurt that is
yeah,
stored
yeah,
within.
yeah. Mm,
Mm.
mm.
So, so I think maybe that's a good place to end our conversation for now, Pella.
Yeah, to
Uh,
be continued.
he has to be continued. And thank you so much for talking with me and for sharing all of the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for the work you're doing. I think this is like the most beautiful part of the work, that we have such reverence for each other's work because it's the same.